My hands used to be strong from years of stirring giant vats of chili and corn chowder. 35 years as a school cook in Portland, Oregon, kept my arms firm, even at 72. Now, my fingers shook just trying to lift the porcelain coffee mug Frank gave me on our 25th anniversary. That was the first sign things weren't just getting old. That was the start of the heavy, cold feeling that settled deep in my bones. I wasn't a complainer. Old habits die hard. And my habit was to put my head down and work. After Frank passed 4 years back, I just kept moving. The little house on Oak Street was mine, paid for, though it always needed a fresh coat of paint or a roof patch. My life was small, held together by Social Security checks and the once-a-month visit from my only boy, David. He had his own life, his own problems. I always told him, "Money doesn't grow on trees, David. You save what you can." It's a lesson he never quite learned. God bless him. Lately, the tired hit different. It wasn't the tired you get after scrubbing the kitchen floor. It was a heavy, sinking feeling that made the 5 steps to the porch seem like a mountain climb. I'd sit down and feel like I was breathing thin air, even with the windows open. The cold was constant, freezing me from the inside out no matter how many blankets I piled on. And the dizzy spells. They felt like the room was tilting sideways, leaving me clutching the nearest chair, waiting for the world to stop spinning. "Mom, you look like a sheet," David said on a Sunday brunch visit. His face was all creases of worry. "Seriously, you are white as snow." I tried to brush it off, forcing a laugh. "Just lack of sunshine, sweetie. You know Oregon." But I knew it was more. My tongue felt swollen, my head pounded. I knew I couldn't keep ignoring it, so I went to the free clinic downtown. The young doctor looked at my nails. They were brittle and thin. She looked at my gums. They were almost white. She didn't use big words, thank goodness. She just said, "Margaret, your blood is weak. You have severe anemia. Your body is starved for oxygen." She told me to eat red meat, spinach, and take heavy iron supplements. That was the cure. Simple food and simple pills. I felt a wave of relief. It wasn't old age after all. It was just a weak blood problem. David and Teresa, his wife, came over immediately after I told them. They acted like I was dying right there on the sofa. Teresa, who always reminded everyone she almost finished nursing school, took over the house immediately. "Mom, you absolutely cannot be alone," Teresa declared, her voice loud and firm. She was already organizing my pantry, throwing out half-used spices. "We are moving in. We'll take care of everything." I hated being a burden. I hated needing help. I spent my whole life making sure David was taken care of. Remember that failed garage he opened 10 years ago? I quietly pulled all my retirement savings out to float him, just so he wouldn't fail. He still failed, but I helped. That's what mothers do. Now here they were, offering to help me. A huge relief washed over me, pushing down the guilt. It is what it is, I thought. I had to let them help. They took over the kitchen completely. David rearranged my whole pill organizer, explaining I was too confused to do it myself. Teresa, she was the cook now. "No more greasy, heavy cafeteria food, Maggie," she announced, serving me a bowl of grayish, watery soup. "We need gentle foods, nothing spicy, nothing challenging. We need to keep things gentle while we build your blood back up. Bland." Everything was bland and soft, but I followed her instructions. She was the one who knew about health, or so she claimed. But instead of getting better, I got worse. Much worse. The fatigue started hitting me so hard I couldn't make it from the couch to the kitchen without resting. The dizziness became so bad that I stopped reading entirely. The words swam on the page. I started forgetting simple things. What day it was, the name of the doctor, where I put my reading glasses 5 minutes ago. One afternoon I wanted something real. I craved a small piece of steak, just like the doctor said. I managed to shuffle to the stove and started thawing a small cut of beef from the freezer. Teresa found me standing there, swaying a little, holding the frying pan. "Margaret!" Her voice was sharp. She swooped in, took the pan gently but firmly out of my hand. "Honey, you need rest. That's too much work. I'll make you the special broth, the thick one. It's what you need right now to rest your system." She never raised her voice, but her control was absolute. I started to feel that cold seed of unease, growing right next to the coldness in my tired body. Why did her food, which was supposed to be so healthy, always taste so strangely flat, almost dusty? And why, 10 minutes after drinking her special vanilla-flavored smoothie, did the world start to swim? I felt worse, much worse, right after her care. "David," I whispered one afternoon, trying to hold a conversation. "I think the pills aren't working. I feel like I'm losing my mind." David patted my shoulder, avoiding my eyes, always watching television or working on his laptop. "Teresa knows best. Mom, you just have to follow the program. Give it time." But time was running out. Teresa started cleaning the house, but not normal cleaning. She was packing things. My little sewing room, where I kept all my antique thimbles and threads, a room full of Frank's memories and mine, was being cleared out like an empty museum display. "We need to streamline, Maggie," she said loudly, tossing my beautiful old lace curtains into a plastic donation box. "David needs to put the house on the market soon." "On the market?" I froze, gripping the doorframe. I never agreed to sell the house. This was my home. Where was I going to go? Teresa saw the panic in my eyes. She changed her tune immediately, putting on the sweet voice. She started talking about the burden of my Medicare copays, the costs of the supplements, and how much easier everything would be once they had liquidated the assets and found me a lovely assisted living place in Arizona. $8,000 a month, she said, but we can handle it after the sale. The suspicion became heavy, metallic, like the coppery taste that sometimes came up in my mouth. Was I just old and confused, forgetting that I had agreed to this? Or was the confusion itself part of the problem? I lay awake that night, tossing and turning under my 2 heavy blankets, still shivering. I felt alone, more alone than I had felt even right after Frank died. The lack of love, the cold, calculating look in Teresa's eyes when she talked about money, hurt worse than the deepest fatigue. I sacrificed everything for David. Was this the payback? A nice, slow neglect? I needed water. My mouth was bone dry, a common feeling now. I reached for my cane, careful not to wake them, and shuffled slowly towards the kitchen, keeping to the shadows. The light in the living room was off, but I saw a faint glow from the hallway, and I heard them, David and Teresa. They were talking low, tense, angry. I stopped just before the doorway, using the heavy wood molding to steady myself. My heart hammered, forcing the thin blood to move too fast. "We can't wait much longer, David," Teresa hissed, her voice sounding tight and ragged. "I'm tired of playing nursemaid. That house is worth everything we need for the new business." David sighed, a deep, exhausted sound I recognized from when he was a boy, and knew he was caught. "I know, but we have to be patient. If we move too fast, the doctors will notice. We need those final lab numbers." "Notice what? My blood counts?" I held my breath, clutching the wood so tightly my knuckles went white. Teresa's voice dropped even lower, dripping with venom and impatience, the sound slicing through the dark quiet of my house. "Just follow the plan," she whispered fiercely. "You hear me? And for God's sake, make sure she finishes every last spoonful. We need to keep those counts low. We're almost there." The quiet of the house after that whisper felt louder than any scream. We need to keep those counts low. We're almost there. That cold seed of unease didn't just grow. It burst. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't old age. It was a plan. My son and his wife were starving my body of the very things I needed to live, just so my blood test numbers would look bad enough for them to take my house and my insurance money. I backed away from the doorway slowly, one shaky step at a time, gripping the cane like a weapon. I got my water, drank it fast, and shuffled back to my room. The next morning, everything looked different. The little things I'd dismissed as fussiness now looked like prison bars. The bland, pale food. David handling my pills. Teresa's constant talk about rest. Teresa came in with my morning drink. A thick, pink smoothie in a tall glass. It smelled faintly of vanilla and chemicals. Normally I would drain it, feeling the immediate heaviness in my head, the sudden need to lie down. Today I took a small sip and pretended the dizziness hit me. "Oh, my head, dear," I mumbled, slumping against the pillows. "It's spinning. I think I need to rest a moment before I finish that." Teresa's eyes narrowed slightly, but she put on her sweet smile. "Of course, Maggie, you rest, but you must finish it before lunchtime. Doctor's orders." As soon as she closed the door, not gently, but with a firm click, I swung out of bed. I knew I couldn't pour it down the sink. She might check. My eyes landed on the fern Frank gave me for my 60th birthday. It was a tough plant, used to the mild Oregon weather. I quickly poured the whole thick pink drink onto the soil until it pooled slightly. I rinsed the glass with plain water and put it back on the tray. I waited. Midday came. I didn't feel the crushing fatigue. My head was clearer than it had been in weeks. I still felt weak, yes, but not like I was breathing thin air. I made it from the bed to the bathroom, maybe 15 steps without stopping to lean on the wall. It wasn't a miracle, but it was a sign. The smoothie was the problem. The next day, the fern was drooping severely. The leaves were turning brown and sickly. I didn't need a lab test to confirm it. The nutritional smoothie was poison. David and Teresa were getting impatient. Teresa started leaving glossy brochures for retirement homes everywhere. On the coffee table next to my reading chair, even tucked into my pill organizer. She kept pointing out the one in Arizona, $8,000 a month. "It's sunny, Mom. You'll love the bridge club," David said, trying too hard to sound cheerful. "We can use the proceeds from the house sale to secure your spot." The house, that was the key. They needed me institutionalized, certified as unable to care for myself, so they could sell Oak Street, collect Frank's insurance money, and probably stick me somewhere cheap while they paid for the $8,000 retirement home fantasy out of my savings. I hated being helpless, but I had learned my first big lesson in the last 24 hours. They expected me to be weak and confused. If I could pretend to be exactly what they wanted, I might survive. I had to investigate. I started observing them like a hawk. Every time Teresa cooked, she used a specific set of containers. The spices were messy, but her vitamins and supplements were always organized, labeled with neat handwriting that reminded me of a prescription. One Tuesday morning, I was sitting on the porch when I saw Teresa leave. She wasn't just running errands. She was carrying a stack of papers, all bundled up, maybe 50 sheets thick. She got into the car, looking stressed and rushed. Suddenly, a voice cut through my thoughts. "Maggie, dear, is everything all right?" It was Mrs. Perkins, my neighbor from across the street. Edna Perkins. She was a couple of years younger than me, sharp as a tack, and a retired school nurse. She had a keen eye for details and always smelled faintly of lavender and Lysol. "Oh, Edna. Hello," I said, trying to steady my voice. Edna shuffled over, leaning on the porch railing. "I saw David drive off a while ago. Your daughter-in-law. She's out and about again, too. I just wanted to check on you. You look like they've washed you with bleach, honey." I hadn't spoken the truth to anyone, not even Frank when he was alive, about the bad things. But standing there, realizing my life was on the line, the words spilled out. "Edna, I think they're hurting me," I whispered, tears suddenly burning my eyes. I quickly told her about the severe anemia, the worsening fatigue, the bland, soft food, and the conversation I overheard last night. We need to keep those counts low. Edna listened. She didn't interrupt, just nodded slowly, her nurse's eyes serious. When I finished, she didn't offer platitudes or call the police right away. She offered medical wisdom. Anemia, extreme paleness, dizziness, forgetfulness, and you're getting worse on a controlled diet designed to treat it. That's wrong, Maggie. That's medically backwards, Edna said firmly. She leaned in closer, dropping her voice. They aren't feeding you poison, dear. They are neutralizing the cure. They are blocking your ability to absorb the iron. I frowned. Blocking? The doctor said red meat and supplements. I take the pills David gives me every morning. Exactly, Edna hissed. David controls the pills, but Teresa controls the food. Think about how iron works. It's tricky. If you eat spinach, which has non-heme iron, and you wash it down with high-calcium milk or certain herbal teas, the calcium and tannins lock onto the iron molecules. Your stomach can't break it down. Your body never absorbs a thing. It passes right through you. It's a slow, deliberate starvation. Edna's explanation hit me hard. Teresa's special broth was heavy, grayish and strangely thick. It must be full of milk powder or high-calcium additives. The smoothies were pale pink, maybe containing a small, useless amount of strawberry, but overwhelmingly dairy. She's turning the food into non-food, I mumbled, horrified. Precisely. She is a medical saboteur, Edna confirmed. They need those hemoglobin and hematocrit numbers, your HGB and HCT, to stay dangerously low. That's what justifies putting you away. That's what triggers the insurance clause, I bet. If you get better, their plan falls apart. The shock was a heavy cold wave, worse than the anemia itself. My own son. I remembered how I drained my retirement savings for his failed garage. I thought, you reap what you sow. But I sowed love and help, and I was reaping betrayal. Edna told me to be quiet, to trust no one but her, and to keep pretending to be confused and weak. I'll be back tomorrow, Maggie. You need the paperwork. You need proof. And we need to get you back on real iron, absorbed the right way. The next day, Wednesday, David and Teresa left for about 3 hours. They said they were going to look at furniture for their new place. I knew they were running errands related to the sale. This was my chance. David kept his important papers locked up in an old file box in the basement storage room, under a pile of Frank's old fishing gear. I hadn't been to the basement in years. The stairs were too steep, too much work. But now, fueled by rage, I didn't feel the weakness. It was replaced by a sharp, burning energy. I shuffled down those 12 wooden steps. It felt like climbing Mount Hood, but I made it. I found the file box. The lock was cheap, one of those little silver ones. I felt around in the pocket of my housecoat and pulled out the antique silver thimble Frank gave me on our 20th anniversary. It was sturdy. I remembered how much Frank loved to watch me sew. With focused, trembling hands, I worked the thimble into the mechanism of the lock. I pried and twisted, ignoring the scrape of the metal against my skin. The lock sprang open with a small, satisfying pop. Inside, the contents were neat and awful. I found the documents I needed. First, my medical chart. It was dated last month. It clearly stated my initial hemoglobin, HGB, was 6. 5GDL, dangerously low. It also had a note, patient advised to take supplements and red meat. Recheck in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. We were almost there. Second, the confirmation of their motive. Frank's $450 $1 life insurance policy. I never knew the amount was that high. David was listed as the sole beneficiary, payable upon Frank's death or upon the insured's my need for permanent, long-term, medically required institutional care. They didn't need me dead. They just needed me declared incompetent and institutionalized. That $450, Zozizozera, would pay for David's new business they kept talking about. But the final crushing piece of evidence was a small torn piece of paper tucked inside the policy folder. It was Teresa's neat handwriting, clearly a reminder to David. Dr. Jensen confirmed the final checkup is scheduled for Friday, 48 hours from now. If her HGB is below 7, 0, we have the clearance. Get her to finish the full amount of the supplement tonight. We need those counts near 0. 48 hours. My life had a deadline. Friday's blood test would be the moment they legally signed away my autonomy, my house, and possibly my life. They were pushing my blood counts down, hard, hoping to hit that critical number, that 7, 0 mark, before the doctor could officially deem me recovered or stable. I sat on the cold concrete floor of the basement, clutching the papers. The pain of the anemia was nothing compared to the awful, cold certainty of this betrayal. I had spent my entire life taking care of David. Every sacrifice, every penny, every worry had been for him. And this was the return. Not just abandonment, but a calculated, slow and cruel eradication. I didn't cry. I was past crying. The sheer white-hot fury burned through the weakness. I felt the determination settle deep in my chest. Over my dead body, I thought, remembering the old phrase, "Not on my watch." I put the documents back exactly as I found them, relocked the box, and made the grueling climb back upstairs. I was breathing heavy. My head was swimming slightly, but I made it. That evening, Teresa served me a bowl of pureed chicken and white rice, tasting bland and dusty, likely loaded with calcium powder. I ate about a quarter of it, pretending to be utterly exhausted, then slid the bowl under the bed until they went to sleep. When I saw Edna the next morning, she brought with her a small brown paper bag. She also brought science. "The problem is absorption, Maggie," Edna whispered, sitting in my kitchen while I pretended to sip my now plain, unspiked coffee. David was locked in his home office. "You can take all the iron pills in the world, but if they are using too much calcium or phytates, your body won't use it. It's like pouring gas into a car with a blocked fuel line." She pulled out a bottle of white pills. "This is ascorbic acid. Vitamin C, Maggie. Pure, simple vitamin C. It's cheap, easy to get, and totally neutralizes their dirty work." Edna explained it clearly, like she was teaching a high school health class. "Studies show that when you take iron, especially non-heme iron, like in spinach or the supplements you'll buy, with a high dose of ascorbic acid, you can boost your absorption by up to 67%. 67%. That meant every single grain of iron I took would be hyperabsorbed. While they were trying to block it 100%, I could force my body to take in 2/3 more. "Here's the plan," Edna said, her eyes twinkling with a conspiratorial excitement. "Throw away any supplement David gives you. We're going back to basics. I bought you high-dose iron pills, the good ones. You take one immediately with a vitamin C pill, and you do this 3 times a day. We will hide the pills under your mattress. If they try to feed you a broth or smoothie, pretend you finished it, but use your little potted fern again." I nodded, feeling the surge of life returning, even before the pills kicked in. The knowledge itself was a cure. "And we have 2 days until Friday," Edna reminded me. 48 hours of intense secret feeding. We need your HGB to jump quickly, not just a little bit. We need your numbers to be high enough to prove you are stabilizing, not fading. And we need proof they did this. My hands were shaking again, but not from weakness. It was adrenaline. Over the next 2 days, I turned into a spy in my own home. I learned to look worse than I was. I stopped combing my hair, perfected a weak, dragging shuffle, and used all my energy to focus on my mission, absorb the iron, and gather the evidence. Edna brought me high-iron foods hidden in Tupperware containers disguised as leftovers for her own fictional sister. A dark spinach and lentil stew, small, rare pieces of steak, the real stuff, not the bland mush Teresa made, and orange juice. Everything was timed perfectly with the ascorbic acid. I felt the difference immediately. The coldness started to recede from my bones. The terrifying dizziness didn't vanish, but it came less often. My thinking was sharper, clearer. It was an incredible rush of power. I was healing myself, right under their greedy noses. Teresa, meanwhile, was oblivious, growing overconfident. She thought my worsening outward appearance meant victory was imminent. "Mom, you really shouldn't get up so much," David said on Thursday afternoon, watching me fake a struggle to get a glass of water. "I was just going to read," I mumbled, pointing at a book that was upside down. "The confusion helps them," I remembered. No, rest," David insisted, taking the book gently away. He looked exhausted himself, stressed out by the approaching deadline. "Teresa is making you a very special thick broth tonight. Just 1 night left until the appointment, Mom. Just hang in there." I knew that special broth would be loaded with calcium to completely block any progress I might have made. The final sabotage. "You're so good to me," I said weakly, patting his hand. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree," I thought bitterly, remembering his father's honest work ethic. This David, this thief, was nothing like the man I raised. That night, I had to get the final piece of evidence. I had found Frank's old micro recorder in the sewing kit while looking for my thimble. I used a strong glue to secure it inside the antique porcelain salt shaker that David and Teresa used for their own dinner table. It was heavy, and they would never notice the tiny switch taped to the bottom. I waited until they were eating their takeout pizza, sitting at the dining table far from my couch. David was complaining about the lawyer's fees. I held my breath, listening, waiting for the right moment. "I'm just worried about tomorrow," David muttered, lowering his voice. "What if Dr. Jensen notices she looks even slightly better? We haven't had a real reading in 6 weeks. Teresa's voice was sharp. "Relax. I used the maximum amount of the calcium powder in her smoothie this morning, and the broth tonight is saturated. The point is to block the absorption, not feed her. She won't absorb a single gram of iron with this ratio. We need to starve the anemia down to the line." The recorder was running. Starve the anemia. The evidence was secured. I spent the rest of the night practicing my performance. I needed to look like I was hours from collapsing. But inside, I felt a deep, steady strength. The high-dose iron, absorbed at a rate of 67%, was already doing its work. I could feel the energy humming beneath the surface of my skin. Friday morning came. David helped me dress, acting gentle and concerned. Teresa was buzzing with excited energy, reapplying her lipstick in the hall mirror several times. "This is it, Mom," David murmured, helping me to the car. "You just rest. You won't have to worry about anything anymore after today." We pulled out of the driveway toward St. Mary's Clinic for the blood test. As we drove, Teresa leaned back. She looked at me, not with pity, but with a triumphant smirk. "This is it," Teresa said again, her voice tight with anticipation. But I adjusted my posture slightly. I felt the comforting, hard shape of the micro-recorder hidden deep in my coat pocket. My blood counts were no longer dangerously low. I had spent 48 hours ensuring that I was walking into that clinic, not as a victim, but as a warrior ready to reveal the truth, holding the iron will to expose my own son. The evidence was ready, but I still needed that final, undeniable proof from the clinic's own lab. "Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story will travel." The Friday morning air felt strangely clean as David helped me out of the car and into St. Mary's Clinic. Teresa practically skipped ahead, adjusting her scarf, radiating suppressed excitement. She checked her phone constantly, no doubt coordinating the next steps of their new, debt-free lives. They ushered me into Dr. Jensen's small, functional office on the second floor, expecting a quick pronouncement of my final, debilitating state. David kept murmuring about how the Arizona weather would be good for my condition. Dr. Jensen, a young man who looked perpetually stressed, sat behind his desk. He was flipping through my chart. David and Teresa settled into the two chairs facing him, forcing me into the third, slightly angled chair. They were positioned to watch the doctor deliver the final blow. "Good morning, Margaret," Dr. Jensen began, his voice flat. "We have the results from your comprehensive panel, performed first thing this morning." David leaned forward, rehearsing his line. "We're just hoping the numbers provide the final clarity, Doctor. Mother is fading quickly." Before Dr. Jensen could respond, the office door opened again. David's smile dissolved like salt in water. A woman in a sharp navy suit, Detective Reynolds, entered. She was followed by a lawyer I didn't recognize. And then, smiling gently, Edna Perkins, my neighbor. Edna smelled faintly of lavender. "What is this?" David stammered, twisting in his seat. "Mother, who are these people?" I didn't answer. I had entered the room shuffling, using my cane, eyes downturned and hair messy. Now I simply pushed the cane away. It clattered against the wall, a sudden loud sound in the sterile room. I sat up straight. The cold, debilitating fear I had played for weeks vanished, replaced by the steady, humming strength of my recovered blood. I felt 72, yes, but I looked decades younger than the ghost they had manufactured. I met David's desperate gaze with a clarity he hadn't seen in months. Dr. Jensen finally cleared his throat, holding up the lab report. "These results are highly unusual, David. You insisted Margaret's condition was deteriorating severely, necessitating urgent institutionalization. We retested the hemoglobin and hematocrit levels this morning. Her HGB is 12.1 grams per deciliter. Her HCT is a healthy 37%. David blinked. 12.1. But that's completely normal for her age. That's higher than the average. Precisely, I said, my voice firm. without a trace of the old tremor. What they were feeding me, doctor, was not a solution. It was the problem. I reached into the pocket of my coat and pulled out the micro recorder. It was tiny, black, and felt heavy with truth. I placed it on the desk and pressed the button, the air filled with the familiar sharp hiss of Teresa's voice. The point is to block the absorption, not feed her. She won't absorb a single gram of iron with this ratio. We need to starve the anemia down to the line. Silence fell, absolute and crushing. David looked at Teresa, who was already pale, and then back at the recorder. He tried to speak, but only a dry click escaped his throat. I didn't give them time. I reached into the folder the lawyer, Mr. Thompson, had brought, and pulled out Teresa's handwritten note, the one that set my deadline. "This is Teresa's handwriting," I stated, pushing the paper toward Dr. Jensen. "It says, Dr. Jensen confirmed the final checkup is scheduled for Friday. If her HGB is below 7.0, we have the clearance. We need those counts near zero." You needed me to fail, David, so you could cash in on Frank's $450,000 insurance policy and sell my home on Oak Street. Teresa finally found her voice, shrill and high. "That's circumstantial. Everyone uses notes. David, tell them this is madness." The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, intervened smoothly, placing copies of my original HGB reading, 6.5 GIDL, next to the new results. Mrs. Stevens was suffering from calculated nutritional sabotage, Mr. Thompson explained, addressing the detective. She was given high doses of calcium powder mixed into every meal, specifically designed to bind to the iron molecules and prevent absorption. This was a slow, deliberate poisoning aimed at maintaining the dangerously low counts needed to declare her mentally and physically incompetent. Dr. Jensen, appalled, nodded. "The recovery in 48 hours is medically impossible through standard protocol. The change in her blood composition suggests a sudden, massive increase in iron absorption, neutralizing the calcium binding." David stood up, knocking his chair over. He dropped to his knees before me, his face twisted into a mask of desperate grief. "Mom, please, don't do this." David sobbed, grabbing the hem of my coat. "I'm your son. I know we messed up, but we can fix it. We can sell the house later. What about the family? You're going to destroy your only son for a house?" I pulled my coat away slowly, separating myself from his touch. I looked down at the man who had traded my life for money. My expression was utterly detached, colder than the deepest chill the anemia had ever caused. "I worked 40 years as a cook, cleaning up other people's messes and teaching you the value of a hard-earned dollar," I said, my voice hard and quiet. "You tried to starve me to death using milk powder and lies, so you could collect $450,000. My son died the moment he signed a note calculating his own mother's failure. The person kneeling here is just a stranger with my son's face. I don't know you anymore." Detective Reynolds moved swiftly. "David Stevens and Teresa Stevens, you are being detained under suspicion of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted elder homicide." David let out a choked cry as the cuffs clicked onto his wrists. Teresa started protesting loudly about her rights and the unfairness, but nobody in that room was listening. They were escorted out, their frantic pleas fading down the clinic hallway. The silence they left behind was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The legal process was swift, fueled by the explicit recording, Teresa's note, and the dramatic reversal of my medical condition. The evidence of calculated nutritional abuse was undeniable. David Stevens was convicted of attempted elder homicide and systematic financial fraud. He received a severe sentence of 14 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for 8 years. He lost his business license and faced complete professional annihilation. Teresa, the primary organizer, was convicted of conspiracy and fraud, receiving 7 years. The most profound consequence was financial and familial. The court stripped David and Teresa of all claims to Frank's $450,000 life insurance policy. They were ordered to pay $300,000 in restitution for financial and emotional damages. Poetic justice was served. They wanted my money for their luxury future, and instead I took theirs for my own recovery and advocacy. The community reaction was brutal. David and Teresa were publicly and socially ostracized. David's few remaining friends cut ties. No one from our extended family attended their trials or sent them letters. They were isolated, serving time in separate correctional facilities in Oregon, alone with their greed. 2 years later, at 74, my life had become exactly what they tried to prevent: strong, purposeful, and free. My physical recovery was miraculous. I had continued the protocol: high-dose iron supplements paired with the ascorbic acid, exactly as Edna had instructed. My blood counts remained stable and healthy. My HGB was always above 12.0 grams per deciliter. The fatigue was gone. The coldness had lifted. I didn't feel the terrifying weakness of severe anemia ever again. I now walked 4 miles every morning before sunrise, feeling the strength return to my arms and hands. I used the restitution money, not for a luxury retirement home, but to launch the Iron Will Foundation, right out of my house on Oak Street. "We aren't curing cancer, dear," I often told volunteers. "We are just teaching grandmothers to listen to their bodies and their brains." Edna Perkins, now my closest confidant and ally, became the foundation's chief advisor. We focused on elder abuse awareness, especially the subtle, hard-to-prove nutritional and psychological abuse. I started holding weekly workshops in my renovated kitchen, which I converted into a community cooking space. I taught the basic science that saved my life. I taught other seniors who showed early signs of debilitating fatigue or confusion. If they tell you that you are too weak to eat a healthy meal, or if they give you supplements but the food is always bland and heavy, I would say, holding up a bottle of vitamin C, "You have to fight back with knowledge. If you take your iron with this, you boost the absorption by 67%. They can try to block it with all the calcium in the world, but your body fights back. That's what saved me, and that's what saves us all. The 67% fight." I taught hundreds of people how to recognize medical gaslighting and subtle starvation. We established a local phone line, staffed by retired school nurses like Edna, offering anonymous advice. I was constantly busy, helping people get medical checks, find lawyers, and regain their independence. My hands, once again, were strong. Not from stirring chili, but from holding the weight of purpose. I often stood in what used to be my sewing room, now the foundation's office, looking out at the sun setting over the Portland skyline. The memory of David and Teresa sometimes felt like a bad dream from a long time ago. The house on Oak Street was no longer just a house. It was a fortress of survival and knowledge. David tried to contact me only once, a long rambling letter from prison filled with self-pity and vague apologies that never quite admitted to attempted murder. I never responded. I had severed that tie completely. The betrayal was too deep to heal. I discovered that the greatest nutrient of all isn't iron or vitamin C. It is the simple restorative power of knowing that your life is still yours to live, and that you have the knowledge to protect it. I look down at my hands now. They are firm, steady, and capable. They were supposed to tremble and fail, leading me to a quiet institutional grave, leaving behind $450,000. But they didn't fail. They held the thimble that broke the lock, they activated the recorder that brought the confession, and they stirred the ingredients of my survival. They failed to steal my life for money. Instead, I used my strength to build a legacy that is truly priceless. The most potent antidote against betrayal is a sharp mind, a clear conscience, and an iron will. And if you stayed with me until the end, leave a comment letting me know what you thought of the story and what kinds of stories you'd like to read more of. Thank you so much for being here. See you in the next emotional story.